Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Terror Cellar. I'm Andy Crofts and I am thrilled to be back for this episode because, as usual, I have a couple of great stories and I just want to read them out to you. It's a pleasure, my pleasure, in fact. And I just want to say thank you for all the lovely messages I've been getting lately. I've been getting some lovely compliments emailed to me or through social media, and honestly, it means the world to me. It really does, and it gives me the encouragement to carry on going, knowing I'm doing something right. Okay, because we all know there's so many podcasts out there, paranormal podcasts, and there's loads, and they're all brilliant. Everyone does such a great job, do you know what I mean? But I guess the only thing that makes us stand out from each other is our own personalities. And because there's so many to connect with, and the fact that you're connecting with mine and you're saying that you really like mine and, you know, you're wishing me all the best with it, well, thank you. That honestly gives me everything I need. That means I'm doing the right thing and I will keep going. But we know that we don't like to talk too much on these things because you're here for the stories, right? Okay, let's just not waste any more time. I have a couple of great stories sent in, and this first one is by Steve in Missouri in America, and he is actually a paranormal investigator. But I think this story comes back before that, so we're going to get straight into that, okay? So, wherever you are in the world, whether you are walking down the road, through a park, walking your dog, you're in the gym on the treadmill, you're sat at home with your headphones on, candle lit, glass of wine, and eyes closed, this is the perfect story for you. And story number 1 is 3 knocks. This happened near the beginning of my involvement with the paranormal. Back then, I was sceptical, still convinced that every strange occurrence had a rational explanation. That belief would soon change. It was a warm summer day. My days off from work fell during the week because of the rotating shift schedule. And with the kids off school, we decided to take a drive in our new used car. A clunky old station wagon with plenty of charm, but covered in faded peeling stickers from its previous owner. I suggested we visit my mother-in-law to show her the car and spend the afternoon together. When we arrived, my mother-in-law wasn't home, but my wife's younger sister was. She greeted us at the door, and after some small talk, I asked if I could borrow a razor blade to scrape away the stickers from the car windows. She shrugged and said, "Sure, check the downstairs bathroom." The first floor bathroom was small, just big enough for a toilet, a sink, and a tall chest of drawers where toiletries were kept. To access the drawers, I had to shut the bathroom door completely. It clicked shut with an old, hollow sound that echoed through the tiny space. I rummaged through the drawers, shifting through loose combs, bottles of hairspray, and forgotten toiletries. As I dug deeper, I heard the unmistakable sound of bare footsteps on the hardwood floor outside the bathroom. They stopped just outside the door. Then 3 solid knocks. Assuming one of the kids needed the bathroom, I called out, "Use the upstairs bathroom, I'm busy." There was a pause, just long enough to be unsettling, before I heard the soft padding of retreating footsteps down the hall. I shook it off and returned to searching the drawers. A moment later, the footsteps returned. Then 3 knocks. I was starting to get irritated. I said, "I'm busy, use the other bathroom," voice sharp with impatience. Again, the steps faded away. Relieved, I resumed my task, muttering about how kids never listen. Just as I reached the back of the bottom drawer, finally spotting a razor blade, the footsteps came back again, slow and deliberate. 3 knocks. This time, anger flared. I yanked the door open, ready to scold whoever was playing these games. but there was no one there. My breath hitched. The hallway was empty, stretching eerily into the quiet house. I quickly moved over to the nearest window overlooking the front yard. My wife, her sister and all the kids were still outside, laughing and talking by the car. None of them had been anywhere near the house. A cold knot twisted in my stomach. Someone else was inside. I moved cautiously to the kitchen, grabbing the largest butcher knife I could find. My heart pounded as I searched every room, every closet, and every shadowed corner of the old house. But there was nothing, no sign of anyone. Shaken, I stumbled back outside, still clutching the knife. My wife's eyes widened when she saw me. "What the hell happened?" she demanded. I stammered out what I'd experienced, asking if anyone had come into the house in the last 5 minutes. Everyone swore they hadn't. A few days later, I told my mother-in-law about the strange incident. Her face paled and she hesitated before speaking. She explained that she had recently hired a handyman to build an addition onto the house for her elderly mother. On several occasions, while working alone, the handyman claimed he had heard the front door open and close by itself. Her next words made my blood run cold. It all started right after my husband died. He passed away only a few weeks earlier and had been cremated. His ashes were still in the house, sitting on the fireplace mantel in the living room. "Did he ever say he wanted his ashes spread?" I asked carefully. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. He loved that old lake lot where he used to fish. He said he'd wanted to be there forever. I gently suggested that she follow his wish, and that his spirit might be trapped and restless. A week later, she spread his ashes at the lake. After that, there were no more footsteps and no more knocks at the door. He'd finally found peace, and so had we. Thank you, Steve, for sending in that great story. Well, yeah, I mean, some spirits, as we know, like to linger, don't they? And they like to walk the same steps as they walked in the house, or just cause a bit of trouble. But some spirits also want to move on, and some spirits cannot rest until they have something accomplished, that they wanted in their living life. So yeah, obviously this story is all about this man who wanted to pass over to the other side, and he simply couldn't until his ashes were placed where he wanted them to be. I find it fascinating that we can, in the afterlife, not be settled about this wish we'd had. We'd had this wish in our living minds, and when we pass over, we still are strong about it. I find that fascinating, sort of thing I need to know more about. But yeah, I'm nattering on. But yeah, thank you, Steve, for sending in that story. That was great. Nice one. And now for story number 2, The White Horse. My story takes place in the early 2000s. Up until I was about 22, I'd always been on the fence about the paranormal world. I'd had a few strange things happen to me over the years, but always tried to explain them as rationally as I could. That is, until I started working at an old English pub on the coast of Kent. I initially started off as a Saturday girl, working the bar from the afternoon until closing time. After just a few weeks there, the bar manager asked me if I wanted a more permanent position at the pub. He had injured his back and was struggling to run the place alone. So me, being 22 and carefree, agreed. I hurried home to my mother's house and packed my possessions into a black plastic bag and made my way back to the pub. Part of the deal was that I'd get a room and board with the job, but I'd have to take on more responsibilities as a result. I was excited by the challenge and the change of pace of my life. However, my first night in the new room was weird. I'd locked up the pub and tidied away all the glasses and ashtrays. This was pre-no smoking in bars, by the way, and put all the bar stools and chairs up on the tables. I turned the lights and jukebox off and made my way upstairs. Once I was in my room, I started hearing someone walking up the stairs, and then moments later hearing them run down the stairs faster than they had ascended. At first, I thought this must be a colleague getting a drink or something from the kitchen. Then it happened again, and again, and again. Something must be up, I thought. Upon hearing it for the 5th time, I opened the door, fully expecting to see my colleague on the stairs. But there was literally no one there. I remember standing there dumbfounded, my brain trying to work out what I had been hearing. Just to make things worse, I could hear my colleague snoring his head off in the room across the hall. There was only 2 of us in the building, and I knew I'd locked all the doors earlier. I put my responsible head on and walked down the stairs and through the kitchen, turning all the lights on as I went. I must have locked someone in, I thought. After an extensive and somewhat unsettling search of the quiet 400-year-old pub, I found no one. I went back to my room and shut the door, placing a chair under the door handle just in case. No sooner had I got into bed and turned the TV on, it started again. I couldn't believe it. Determined to catch the person in the act, I quietly got up and got the door ready to fling open when I heard them reaching the top of the stairs. I wrenched the door open so fast that I nearly knocked myself out with it, but there was still no one there. Frustrated and slightly shaken, I shut the door again and decided to ignore it. The following morning I asked my colleague if he'd gotten up in the night. He said that after he takes his pain relief, he's dead to the world. I told him what I'd heard, and he just shrugged and said it's probably just the building settling, due to it being so old. I let it go and carried on with my day. But it didn't stop. This went on for weeks. Every night, the same thing. Up and down, up and down. I'd just put the TV on and ignore it. After a month of being there, other things started to happen. I'd be bottling up behind the bar and I'd hear someone move a bar stool as if they were about to sit down. I'd get up and ready myself to greet them, only to find the bar empty. I'd be reading my paper and drinking my coffee at the bar, and the till would ping and fly open. One evening, I'd locked up and gone to bed only to hear chairs being moved down in the bar. At this point, I'd gotten so used to hearing things move that I didn't bother to check and decided I would deal with it in the morning. The next morning, the cleaning lady from the village had let herself in, as she usually did on a Sunday. After a few minutes, she shouted up to me and asked me what on earth had gone on last night. Perplexed and somewhat annoyed at having to get up so early, I walked down to the bar to see what she was talking about. To my absolute horror, I saw all the chairs piled up around the fireplace. I remember standing there with my mouth open. I'd heard them moving. I explained what I heard to the cleaner and then for some reason told her about all the other things that had been happening. She just smiled at me and said, "Oh, well, I'm sure it's nothing." Not the reaction I was expecting, but at least she didn't tell me I was crazy. As the weeks went by, we gained another new staff member. I trained her up and we built up a nice friendship. She only worked weekends, so didn't usually stay at the pub overnight, until one evening when he had had a band on and a bit of an after party with some of the locals. That night, she'd slept in the guest bedroom adjacent to my room. At some point in the early hours of the morning, I awoke to hear screaming. When I tell you my heart was beating so fast, I literally mean I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. I got up and threw my door open to see my colleague shaking and crying in the doorway. She told me that a man had walked past the door and then walked back again, only this time he had put his head in the door to look in her room. She said he then walked into the bathroom next door. I went into the bathroom and put the lights on. Nothing. No one there. She was absolutely adamant that he had literally just walked in there. So where was he? And more to the point, who the hell was he? And what was he doing in the pub at stupid o'clock? I ran around the pub like a woman possessed, convinced that someone else was there. As usual, I found nothing. We didn't sleep the rest of that night, and ended up drinking mugs of tea and watching weird selling shows on the TV to try and distract ourselves. My colleague never came back to the bar after that night, sadly. Not that I blame her. More weeks went by and weird things kept happening. Whistling and sighing noises, and weird smells like body odour. Although I'm not entirely convinced that wasn't a few of our locals. One night, in the heat of the summer, there had been a thunderstorm. I'd awoken to lightning and flashing illuminating my room. When I opened my eyes, I saw a man standing at the window. I didn't move, I just watched him. He had a white shirt on with what looked like a dark waistcoat over the top. He was looking out at the road. I wasn't scared, I was just curious. The lightning flashed again and he was gone. In the morning, I'd gone to use the bathroom and moved away the chair from the door handle, as I'd become accustomed to doing, only to pause for a moment, remembering what I'd seen in my room just a few hours before. I know I was awake, and I know what I'd seen. How had he gotten into my room with the chair against the handle? A few days later, I'd been hoovering in the pool room mid-morning. It was a sunny day, and I'd just opened the bar. I noticed movement out the corner of my eye and glanced up. What I saw was a tall, smoky figure right in front of me. I couldn't see any distinguishable features, just a smoky-looking person. I can still see it now in my mind, if that makes sense. I wasn't afraid, and I didn't stop what I was doing. I glanced down for a second, and then it was gone. In the final weeks I was there, I began to feel like I'd opened a door in my mind about the paranormal. I was beginning to feel a fascination into the world of the unexplained. I started to feel like I'd been lucky to have such strange, if not slightly, unnerving experiences. In the winter of that year, I'd been offered a job in the profession I'd been searching for, so I worked my last shift at the bar. Fast forward 4 years, and a chance encounter with an old colleague from the bar had me reliving old occurrences that went on there. He didn't believe in any of it, but I knew he was just trying to cover up the fact that he was absolutely terrified. He told me that the new owners had renovated the place and that they had opened the fireplace in the middle of the bar and turned it into an open planned space. He said that they had found very old tins or what looked like tea or tobacco in the chimney. He also said that all the weirdness had stopped after that. So what had been happening with all the ghostly activity there? Was the ghost a smuggler of years gone by? And was he trying to tell me that his loot was in the chimney? Is that why all the furniture was dragged to the fireplace every now and then? Was that why he was running up and down the stairs so frequently? Or was he reliving a moment in time where he was hastily hiding his loot from the law? To this day, I don't know why I experienced the things I did in that pub, but I will say this, it's been 22 years since my time there, and I've always felt privileged to have witnessed such an extraordinary paranormal activity. Thank you, Becky Connaughton, for sending in that amazing story, and what a great story it was. You've had some great experiences there. I mean, that is a ghost investigator's dream, isn't it? That place, the White Horse pub. We've spoke about things like this in the past, about, ghosts being attached to things or reliving their life as they did, but obviously on the other side. Yeah, was it his loot, was it his tobacco tins or whatever that he had left in the fireplace? Was it simply that was keeping him attached to the pub? Or was it completely unrelated? Or was he just a local, one of the people in the pub. Do you know what I mean? And he was a regular. Obviously, we're never going to know all this stuff, but there's so many questions about it. And the shocking thing, the thing that actually made me stop reading and stop for a second, was when your colleague was staying in the other room, and she said the man walked past, back again, and then popped his head in the room. Now that shocked me for a moment. That just made me, whoa. That's like what you just don't want to see. The head coming in the room. Whoa. That I stopped recording for a second and just had a moment, purely because I'd had a ghost experience when I was younger, which I talk about in episode 1 of the Terror Cellar. I'd had a ghost experience where the dark thing rushed past the door, but it didn't put its head back in. And I always had a fear of what if it had, I'd never ever get past the vision of that face looking at you. So anyway, Becky, that was an amazing story. And, it'd be fascinating to know what's going on these days. I mean, are they still... I know you said the things stopped, but I wonder if there's been any more things happening. But anyway, yeah, thank you for sending it in. And that was great. 2 great stories there. We have reached the end of the show. So thank you very much for listening in. Remember to send in your stories for me to read to the Terror Cellar podcast at gmail.com. Okay? Send them over and I'd love to feature them on the show. But I will see you for the next episode of the Terror Cellar. Don't have nightmares. Bye-bye.